Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth. Written by the Hanged Man 317 and read by Purple Star. Chapter 25. Era had never been so mortified in her entire life. There were moments where she'd fucked up, yes. Moments of failure and weakness and swift punishment for her transgressions. But those were always tinged with a bitter taste of pain and disappointment, as well as the harsh glare of one of her handlers. This was just twitching fingers and shuffling feet, blood rising to her face as she resolutely looked anywhere but at Eraserhead. Pull yourself together. Why did he even care, though?
He doesn't care. There's no such thing as free kindness, bird.
That was fine. But what did he have to gain? What was the play? The job? The catch? If he'd pressed her, if he'd leaned into those swelling memories, he could have pried anything out of her. A name, a crime, a confession. She'd have told him anything. So why did he pull her out of it? Trust. Era could have snorted at the thought. Like she'd ever trust a pro-hero. But why was it necessary for him to build trust with her as a student? Wouldn't it be more efficient if he fostered a healthy respect? Fear, even. That was how it had been with her old teachers, with their biting words and vicious fists. And they'd taught her quite effectively. She'd never forgotten a lesson. Perhaps he was just a different kind of teacher. One who was weaker and unable to rely on such tactics. Argus had been like that. Argus never hit her, hardly even spoke to her, just silently stared at her from a corner of the room as she worked through her stealth exercises. And Era knew Argus wasn't weak. Why would Phoenix keep him around otherwise? But he certainly wasn't the kind of person who could maintain an intimidating presence. One could say that Argus barely had any presence at all. There was a reason he was charged with her stealth lessons. The man was a fucking ghost when you wanted to be. But Eraserhead... Well, she supposed he was Aizawa sensei now that he was actually teaching her one-on-one. Was no Argus. The man could intimidate his students into a subdued silence with a single glare. Could glower a villain into submission without lifting a finger. Could radiate an aura of unease by standing there and doing nothing. He should have had no trouble inspiring the appropriate amount of fear. In fact, with his gruff persona, Era suspected that his use of kindness in order to build some sense of trust would be more difficult than simply going about it the right way. Even Argus had never been kind. Argus had just given her an absence of pain. He was an effective teacher because his clear and overwhelming skill spoke for itself, and made it impossible to ignore his lessons. Aizawa-sensei was skilled too. He could have just relied on that to back him up. So why did he talk her from that spiral? None of it made sense. And then the man had to top it off with all this talk of her former teachers, how they trained her incorrectly. Was he insane? Were her own talents not blindingly obvious? Era would have been dead many times over if it weren't for those valuable lessons and the steel-tipped boots that enforced them. Well, maybe not dead. She wasn't sure what would have happened if she'd died before her quirk kicked in. No use wondering about it now. Thankfully, at that moment the door cracked open and snapped her from that line of thought. Shinsou peeked his head through, warily scanning the gym. Is everyone alive and unstabbed? Scratch that. Not thankfully. Era's jaw clenched painfully as she remembered the last time she'd spiraled on a training mat, her fingernails digging into her palms as she forced herself to match the dry humor in his voice. Hilarious. It was one time. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Aizawa staring at her, but she refused to turn or acknowledge it. That was quite enough out of him for the day. Shinsou snorted.
One time is too many times, dumb eck.
He stumbled forward with a wheeze, as the tiniest old lady Era had ever seen bustled in with a scowl plastered across her face.
Who's injured?
Era repressed a wince, instead smoothing her expression into something placid and respectful as she stepped towards the woman, who she assumed must be Recovery Girl, if her doctor's garb and syringe-themed cane was any indicator. I sincerely apologize. I think there must have been a misunderstanding. It's my fault. I'm really sorry about wasting your time, but actually...
Suzuki took a bad fall after I kicked her in the chest, and then appeared to suffer from a panic attack,
Aizawa said from behind her. Stiffening, Era resisted the urge to shoot him an incredulous glance over her shoulder. She was saved from the necessity, as Recovery Girl pierced him with a scathing glare herself.
Of course, and I assume that this all somehow occurred while you were following the recovery schedule I set for you?
Era couldn't believe her eyes. Aizawa actually fidgeted beneath her gaze, glancing off to the side and muttering almost beneath his breath.
I have a job, Shuzenji, and it's not like I'm in that much pain.
Because of the painkillers!
The old lady rushed past Era and waved her cane at Aizawa threateningly.
You don't feel any pain because of the painkillers, Shouta! I swear you're as dense as your students!
Era allowed herself a huff of laughter, unable to keep the grin from playing across her lips when Aizawa's narrowed eyes snapped towards her at the sound.
That is not why I called you,
he said evenly. But Era wasn't about to let him turn this around so quickly. Please don't be mad at Aizawa-sensei, Era pleaded with a tug at her own sleeves, avoiding Recovery Girl's gaze when the old lady whipped around on her. I mean, he's only trying to teach us the best he can, even through the pain, right? And it was really great of him to go all out and spar with me even when he's hurting like that. Like, isn't that so plus ultra? Era could have sworn that she caught Aizawa mouth something along the lines of, "You fucking brat," before Recovery Girl whirled around on him again.
You were sparring? I just took those bandages off today. Do you want me to put them back on? I swear I will wrap you from head to toe.
Can we maybe have this conversation after you've checked my student for injuries?
Said Aizawa, a wary strain to his voice.
What? Oh, right. Of course. Hello there, dear. I don't believe I've had you in my office before.
She wouldn't have. A visit to the nurse's office would mean absolute disaster, so Era was sure to hide her injuries religiously. Laughing softly, Era gave her a shy smile. Yeah, I tend to not get hurt too much. I'm pretty careful. Aizawa snorted.
You just got out of the hospital. You don't even wear gloves when you're at the punching bag, even though it messes up your hands, added Shinsou helpfully. You are the opposite of careful.
Era bit back a growl, as both Aizawa and Recovery Girl raised an eyebrow at her.
If you get blood on my equipment, I'm expelling you,
said Aizawa with a sigh.
Child, you really should take more care of yourself in your training. Hold on a second, did you say she just got out of the hospital?
A few days ago,
said Aizawa hastily. Recovery Girl's scowl relaxed when she looked back at Era.
All right, well, let's see what's wrong. Does your chest hurt?
No, Era lied. Of course it fucking hurt. She'd caved in her sternum just the other night when she took a particularly nasty fall. Clumsy, reckless, stupid. She shouldn't have been back on the streets at night anyway with all the hype around the USJ.
Well, let's just check and see if there's any bruising, Can you lift your shirt up for me a bit? I can ask them to leave if you'd like,
she added, as if noticing Era's flash of fearful hesitation. It wasn't about Shinsou or fucking Eraserhead. Shit. This is why she'd wanted to avoid a trip to the nurse's office at all costs. How in the name of fuck was she supposed to explain gunshot wounds? The thousands of little scars crisscrossing up her torso from claws and blades and flickering flames. One of Era's arms began to curl around her stomach before she could summon the presence of mind to force it back to her side once more. Weakness. Recovery Girl pursed her lips, but Era cut her off before she could speak.
Take control of the situation.
I'm really okay. It doesn't even hurt, honestly. Shinsou rolled his eyes at her.
Fetal position on the ground.
Even if it doesn't hurt, I'd still like to take a look at it. Would you be more comfortable if we went to the locker room? Or even back to my office?
No, she hissed, breath stuttering with hospital beds and surgical trays and the thick stench of chemicals.
Breathe.
They were staring at her, and so she smoothed her face from whatever it was that had concerned them with an easy laugh. Sorry, I didn't mean to snap like that. I just really don't like people fussing over me, you know? I'm honestly fine, and I don't want to waste your time more than I already have.
Lord, you're just as bad as Shouta,
muttered Recovery Girl, before whipping around on Aizawa once more.
What are you teaching your students?
I'm not. This is not on me.
Oh, really? First Midoriya and now this one.
First of all, Midoriya is clearly All Might's fault. Second, I've told all of them countless times the importance of treating your injuries.
Lead by example.
Recovery Girl snapped, before turning back to Era, who was desperately trying to keep the shock from her face. Was Aizawa really allowing her to be so dismissive? Disrespectful? Did they have some sort of relationship dynamic that she was unaware of? Era knew that healers often got more leeway when it came to the rules, but it wasn't like they were ever permitted to dismiss them altogether. If someone at her rank or below her talked to her like that, she would have no choice but to retaliate swiftly, else she might risk looking weak in the eyes of both her trainers and her peers. But here Aizawa was, put on the defensive by an old woman who barely came up to Era's chest.
Dear, there isn't a lot I can do for you if you won't let me take a look at your injuries.
There's nothing to look at, said Era stiffly. Shit. What would make her back off? A mask. She needed a mask. Something that would make them uncomfortable. Unwilling to press, but not so concerning as to warrant further investigation. Although perhaps that ship had already sailed.
Maybe I should just lean into it at this point.
Era allowed herself to wrap an arm around her stomach, to glance off to the side with a wavering grimace. Look, I don't really like people touching me like that, okay? It makes me feel bad. Weakness. Era forced herself not to tense in anticipation of pain, to remind herself that this was not the dark or her training.
Touching you like what?
Recovery Girl asked softly. And fuck, she was asking questions. But at least she seemed to be backing off, stance becoming a little less adversarial. Doctors, Era managed to grit out, avoiding their gazes in earnest. I don't like medical stuff. Examinations. It just freaks me out, okay? She tried to make it sound defensive, injected with what she imagined the tone of a flippant teen to be, But honestly, she wasn't sure if it was working. Aside from Recovery Girl, and Era risked a glance in her direction. She wasn't advancing. Didn't seem to be directing Aizawa to beat the shit out of her either, which was honestly a good sign. Okay. So this weakness would be tolerated here. Era realized that she was holding tension in her shoulders, and relaxed it by increments small enough so as not to be noticeable.
Dear, said Recovery Girl at last, are you saying that medical examination is a trigger for you?
Trigger? Era felt her brow wrinkle. What? Like the drug? That didn't make any sense. Oh, shit. Oh, fuck. She'd said the wrong thing. Should have known better than to even think about relaxing in a situation like this. Aizawa-sensei narrowed his eyes, tension setting his shoulders into something that lit a spark of anxiety in Era's chest.
Why do you even know about?
He began, but Recovery Girl cut him off with a glare, before softening her gaze and returning it to Era.
No. A trigger is something that can cause you psychological distress. For example, if someone had a traumatic event that had to do with dogs, then dogs could be a trigger for them. Seeing a dog might cause a panic attack.
Recovery Girl spoke kindly, with the warmth of someone who didn't find it bothersome to explain something that Era should have obviously already known, judging by their reactions. It was clear now, though. They thought she was weak. Perhaps it was better that way, then, to let them underestimate her so that she might operate without so much suspicion. Something about that chafed at her, though she wasn't sure why. Perhaps it was because Eraserhead was Aizawa's sensei now. She couldn't afford to seem weak to a teacher. Recovery Girl seemed to take her silence as an invitation to continue.
I'm guessing you haven't spoken to anyone about this, then? Are there any other triggers that...
No, said Era far too tersely. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm not broken. A lie. She was very much broken. But it wasn't as if these heroes could fix her. Steel entered Recovery Girl's gaze, but her voice was no less warm.
I'm not implying anything of the sort. Has someone else suggested there might be something wrong with you?
I don't know why we keep you around, Bert. Now start again.
No.
Well, there is nothing wrong with having triggers, or things that cause you distress. Plenty of pro heroes have some trauma or another. It's about how we process it and move beyond it that's important.
Era snorted at that, staring at her incredulously, only to find growing concern staring right back at her in the eyes of both Recovery Girl and Aizawa. Shit, wrong mask. She hastily swapped it out for something more solemn, feeling the brittle edges chafe at her skin. Of course. Recovery Girl didn't seem convinced.
You know, almost every staff member at UA has some sort of psychological training. I'm a licensed counselor, and our on-site therapist is very...
I'm fine. The mask crumbled beneath her fingers to reveal whatever putrid mess lay beneath, and Era desperately swapped it out for another one with a shaky laugh and a minute adjustment of her stance. Sorry, I shouldn't have snapped. I just don't need anything like that, okay? I'm fine. I'm not weak. I can take care of myself. I don't need that stuff.
Right. Well, I'm glad to hear that you weren't injured. Shouta, would you care to join me outside for a second?
There was something in her voice that Era knew should concern her. But as they finally left the gym, she found herself too relieved to care. Shit. She'd really screwed this one up, huh? I shouldn't have fucking come. I should have just turned down the offer, even if it would have looked suspicious. I should have.
Hey, where are you going?
Oh, right. Shinsou. Where was she going? It seemed that she was on her way to the weights. I'm gonna lift for a bit.
Weren't you just injured? Aizawa-sensei didn't tell us to.
I wasn't injured. I'm fine. Shinsou huffed.
Okay then, great. Maybe we can talk about what just happened then, unless you want to be a stubborn ass again.
Wow, you know me so well. These were nice weights. Clearly UA had spared no expense.
Era,
said Shinsou. Too sharp. Too close. When did he get so close?
Hey, don't ignore me.
Or what?
Gonna brainwash me again, smart guy? 'Cause that turned out real well for you last time.
Why did she say that? It was the wrong thing to say. The thing she knew would cut deep. This is all I'm good for. For jamming her blade into weak points and twisting.
Low blow.
Shinsou sounded unamused, but not necessarily upset either.
You trying to piss me off? Because that's my move.
Ah, that's why she'd said it. Unsettling. How Shinsou had read her before her brain had even caught up to herself. Era wanted him to back off, desperately. So she was pushing him away the only way she knew how, by cutting off the limb before the poison could spread. Quick and brutal, like everything she'd accomplished. She couldn't do that here. Having another falling out with Shinsou would be devastating given her current situation, as it would only lead Aizawa to ask questions about why they were no longer talking to each other. Heroes had a habit of meddling. And I like Shinsou. I don't want to drive him away. He's a good friend. A small part of her subconscious squeaked out, before she mercilessly crushed it beneath her heel. That was quite enough of that.
Hey, Era, you listening to me?
Yeah, sure, whatever. Era picked up a dumbbell and judged its heft, musing to herself how much more satisfying it would be if she could just get out and fly across the rooftops.
Really? Because it doesn't seem like it.
What do you want me to say? Asked Era, exasperated as she set the weights down once more and reached up to rub at her temples.
It was an error. It won't happen again. God, you sound like a robot.
Era resisted the urge to grind her teeth. Sometimes it's better to lay your emotions aside and examine the facts.
And now you sound like Aizawa-sensei. Seriously, what is with you?
I don't know what you're... Shinsou snorted.
Yeah, okay, sure. You won't even look at me.
With a low growl, Era whirled around on him, taking a single step into his space before managing to rein herself in. There, I'm looking at you. Happy?
Not particularly, no.
Shit, if looks could kill. She let out a bark of laughter, shoving past him and towards the track. If I wanted you dead, then you'd be dead.
Again with the mob boss shit. Let it go already.
Annoyingly enough, Shinsou turned to follow her, hands stuffed into his pockets as he trailed her from a few feet behind.
What are you doing now, dumbass?
None of your fucking business.
Really? Looks like you're planning on going for a run. Didn't take you for a masochist.
You know, some of us actually enjoy exercise.
Sounds fake. Sure you're not just running away from your problems?
Era could feel her jaw creak with pressure as she hastily unclenched it. No need to crack a molar over this. Shit. It wasn't as if she was being tortured. Why the fuck is this getting under my skin?
Hello, Era. This thing on?
You're insufferable. Shinsou let out a dry huff of laughter.
Oh, says you. Care to answer the question?
I would not.
Okay, then how about this? If I can keep up with you for a mile, then you have to talk about it.
Era couldn't help it. A cackling burst of laughter fled her chest.
What?
Shinsou huffed, crossing his arms.
No need to laugh. I know what I said.
Shinsou, you are... It isn't... Fuck, are you fucking serious? Shinsou, keep up with her. For a mile? The sheer absurdity of the suggestion was enough to confuse the ill humor that had taken up residence in her chest. Did you forget how those first 2 miles went?
I was pacing myself,
said Shinsou defensively.
If it's just a mile, I can run way faster.
And did you not consider that I could as well?
Era felt a smirk tug at her lips and allowed it to slide across her face. Okay, sure. If you can keep pace, then we'll talk about it. But if you can't and I beat you, then you have to keep running for as long as I do. Shinsou paled at the suggestion.
Wait a second.
What? Scared you're gonna lose? He hesitated, glancing off to the side, before determination set itself into his shoulders and, oh, this was a distraction. A poorly thought up one, but a distraction nonetheless. Something clenched within her chest at that, and she dutifully ignored it as she cut him off with a sigh. Never mind. If we did that, I think you might actually burst a lung. She hummed to herself, glancing at the door through which their teacher still hadn't returned. Spar?
Shinsou huffed. Seriously? I don't think you should even be running.
I'm not injured.
Well, clearly something's wrong, so why don't you just tell me?
Don't make it harder on yourself, little bird.
Nothing's wrong, I just need... Era hesitated, running a hand through her hair and finding it distastefully shaggy. She needed to cut it again, or it had become long enough to grab. I need a distraction, okay?
Are you sure?
Asked Shinsou doubtfully.
Because I'm starting to feel like you're not the best when it comes to deciding what you actually need.
Era rolled her eyes and continued towards the track. What would you suggest then?
Recovery girl talked about a therapist.
I don't, hissed Era, need a fucking therapist. If one more person suggests that, I swear I'm going to...
Calm down, you'll hurt yourself.
Then drop it, she snapped, stretching her arms above her head with a satisfying series of pops and cracks. She shook out her legs and prepared for a no doubt unsatisfying run. I'm starting.
Fine, if I beat you?
Yeah, whatever. Don't hold your breath. Shinsou did not win. He didn't even come close, though Era was sure he made a valiant effort, given the way he collapsed to the ground at the end of the first mile, sweat pouring down his face and chest heaving with every breath.
Fucking physical quirks, I swear,
he wheezed as Era darted past, already well into her second mile.
What the fuck even are you?
Era didn't answer. She was too intent on the burn in her lungs and the tearing muscles in her legs. Finally feeling her body push itself closer and closer to the limit, and she forced her pace to remain quick and constant. It wasn't enough, but it was close. There was no verticality here. No chance to jump and fall and slide and roll. The colorful outline of the rock wall caught Era's eye as she sped past.
Oh, what the hell are you doing now?
Called Shinsou breathlessly. Era simply shot back a non-committal huff as she raced towards the wall, leaping up to snare a handhold and swinging herself to the next in quick succession. She reached the top fairly quickly, but at least she felt like she was going somewhere instead of running in fucking circles over and over again. It wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. The burn of her muscles wasn't so fierce as to displace the searing swell of emotions in her chest. The rope's cord swayed at her side, lining the edge of the building where the walls met the ceiling. Maybe she could...
Get down from there before Aizawa sees you and freaks out. Seriously, what is wrong with you?
A lot of things, probably, Era replied from the top of the wall, her legs swinging idly as she contemplated the view. Do you think he'd mind if I climbed to the roof?
Yes. Yes, I do think he'd mind, actually.
Lame. Shinsou let out a strangled laugh and plopped down at the bottom of the wall, back braced against it.
You know, I feel like if I'd said no, you would have actually done it. And that just goes to show how much you fucked up my sense of normal.
Era hummed, peering down at him. I'm still considering it, even though you said yes. Imagine the look on his face.
That man is going to kill you.
I'd like to see him try. Come to think of it, could Aizawa's quirk cancel out a regeneration? She filed that away for testing at a later date, when her skin didn't feel like it was itching from the inside. You coming up here or what?
Yeah, no thanks. I think I'm good here.
Afraid of heights? Asked Era with a grin. Shinsou just scowled up at her.
Afraid of breaking my neck? Aren't you supposed to have a harness or something for that?
Aw, come on. This thing is what, 40 feet tall?
I hate even looking at you up there. Seriously, what is wrong with you?
Don't you want to go underground? Eraserhead hangs out on top of buildings all the time, you know.
How do you know I want to go underground?
Era gave a little laugh, drumming her fingers against the top of the wall in an unsuccessful bid to dispel some of her nervous energy. Because that's where your quirk would work best? Would be a little difficult to brainwash people when they know it's coming. I assume there's limitations, and you wouldn't want your enemies to know what those are. Shinsou huffed, leaning his back against the wall and letting his eyes fall closed for a moment.
Yeah, I need a verbal response for my quirk to work. And a physical jolt or pain can snap people out of it.
Weakness. Weakness. It was a moment of vulnerability, and Era recognized it as such. Why was he sharing this with her? To show that he trusted her?
Bad move.
Besides, it wasn't as if she could reciprocate. Yeah, well, all the more reason to go underground. You wouldn't want villains knowing that.
Like me,
she thought with a barely repressed wince.
You shouldn't have told me that.
Do you really think Eraserhead hangs out on roofs? I always thought that was an exaggeration.
Given that the only few times she'd interacted with the man had involved rooftops, she'd consider it a safe bet. I think underground heroes go wherever they need to. But on patrol, a rooftop is a good place to get your bearings and survey your surroundings, so... Shinsou glared up at her suspiciously.
And you would know this because...
A cautious bubble of laughter bloomed between her ribs, shunting aside the burning dark for just a moment. Whatever could you be implying?
Please tell me you don't climb tall buildings for fun.
Okay, said Era, unable to resist a smirk. I don't climb tall buildings for fun.
Now, why do I feel like you're lying to me?
Well, if you consider that tall is a rather subjective qualifier. Shinsou groaned, gently smacking his head against the wall.
The fact that you're still alive is honestly incomprehensible to me.
Era chose to ignore the biting irony of that statement. Oh, like you wouldn't leap at the chance to climb a nice building. Where's your heroic spirit?
Maybe after I get some training from a professional, so I don't die?
A broken bone is the best teacher money can't buy.
Interesting how that doesn't even break top 10 on the list of most concerning things you've said. Interesting how you're keeping track.
Era maneuvered herself so she could lie down on the thin platform, one leg hanging over the edge as she yawned. Surprisingly enough, the itch beneath her skin had died down to a manageable simmer. She hadn't even had to bleed for it. Strange day. Shinsou looked up at her with a strangled noise.
You are going to fall and break your neck, and then it'll be my ass on the line. Please come back down.
Era laughed, shooting him a grin that was all teeth. If you insist. She rolled off the ledge. Shinsou leapt to his feet with a panicked shout, the specifics of which Era didn't quite hear, as she focused on the wind through her hair and the thrill of gravity tugging at her limbs, before reaching out and catching herself in one of the colorful handholds, bringing her descent to a jarring stop that left the memory of dislocated joints jolting through her arm in fitful trembles.
Holy fucking shit, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Era ignored Shinsou's stream of curses as she slowly released her grip on the handhold, allowing herself to fall the remaining distance and land nimbly on her feet, knees bending to absorb the impact before she collapsed altogether in a fit of raucous laughter.
Oh my god, that was the funniest thing I've ever seen. I thought you were going to die. What the hell, Era? That isn't a fucking joke!
Despite his words, Shinsou settled on the ground beside her, and she could clearly see the beginnings of a nervous grin beginning to show on his face.
Stop! Stop laughing, you idiot!
Era smiled, and it felt good. Not the fake kind that she fixed to her masks, or the kind she twisted out of a barely repressed snarl, but something warm and real and aching. It's gonna take more than a rock wall to kill me. What, you really have so little faith?
You are actually the most insane person I have ever met.
Era snorted.
Have you even paid attention to the crazy shit Eraserhead gets up to? No, because he's an underground hero, and also that's his job. You just do this for kicks.
Oh, come on, you like it. It keeps you on your toes.
You're going to send me to an early grave.
Shinsou ran a hand through his hair in cartoonish distress.
Yesterday, I found gray hairs. I'm 15, Era. 15.
Era snorted, sitting up from where she'd been lying on the floor. Anything would be better than your natural hair color.
At least I'm interesting.
He shot back easily.
You're bland as fuck. How are you gonna market yourself without any defining features?
Through reckless endangerment, obviously.
Obviously,
agreed Shinsou with a roll of his eyes.
Seriously, don't do that when Aizawa's watching. I think you might actually give him a heart attack. Shit, I think you gave me a heart attack.
Once again, the man jumps between rooftops fairly regularly. I'm sure it's not the most dangerous thing he's seen this week.
Once again, I'm telling you it doesn't matter. Also, you're talking with a lot of confidence for someone who's never seen him on patrol.
Who says I haven't? Era grinned at Shinsou's scathing glare.
I says,
he sighed, scratching at his neck where the sweat had no doubt dried uncomfortably.
Era, can we please?
There's nothing to talk about, she said softly, glancing towards the door again. Somehow, the little bundle of emotions threatening to burst inside of her had stilled and she could breathe again. Could talk without snapping and snarling. I'm sorry. If I could, I would. But there's nothing I can say. You understand?
No.
Shinsou rubbed his hand across his face, voice laced with poorly concealed frustration.
But fine. I get it. Just, you know you can. Talk to me?
Era snorted, looking back to find him fidgeting uncomfortably. You aren't used to being in this position, I take it?
I was never really one for friends.
he admitted, a bitter bent to his tone.
Though I'm guessing you're probably in the same boat.
What is that supposed to mean? Asked Era with no real bite. Is my sparkling personality not enough for you?
Maybe it's a little much.
Shinsou huffed.
I'm just saying, if you want, I'm here.
Ah. Now it was Era's turn to fidget, though she disguised it with a brisk tug at her gym clothes.
And, to you as well?
Shinsou rolled his eyes.
Great. We're fantastic at this.
Well, our first meeting did consist of me kicking the shit out of you, so I feel like it's already a bit unconventional as far as friendships go.
You did not kick the shit out of me. I held my own.
A little revisionist there. I distinctly remember wiping the floor with you. Shinsou scowled.
I'm trying to be nice. Why is it that you always have to insult me when I'm being nice?
It's a defense mechanism, answered Era with a grin, to keep me from getting too close to others. Shinsou tried and failed to repress his laughter, punching her lightly on the shoulder.
Mood. Fuck, we really are bad at this. It's kind of pathetic. Be more confident. Okay, sorry. I am 100% sure that we suck at this. It is undeniably pathetic. Be less confident.
Shinsou laughed again, and Era couldn't help but crack another smile. End of chapter 25.